At 28, Amara Clark is 3 months behind on rent with a 6-year-old daughter to feed, working double shifts as a restaurant server in Seoul's most exclusive district, until one rainy evening when her daughter wanders over to a man in a wheelchair who has been sitting alone for 2 hours, and everything changes. The rain had started around 6, a cold November drizzle that turned Seoul streets into mirrors of neon and headlights. Inside Maison Laurent, the city's premier French restaurant, the atmosphere was warm, hushed, expensive. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over white tablecloths and gleaming silverware. The clientele wore designer clothing that cost more than Amara made in 3 months. She moved between tables in her formal black and white uniform, notepad ready, smile professional despite the exhaustion that lived in her bones. At 28, Amara Clark was supposed to be building a career, maybe even thinking about settling down, creating the stable life she'd dreamed of when she'd moved to Seoul 5 years ago to teach English. Instead, she was 3 months behind on rent, $2,800 in debt, with exactly $400 in savings and a landlord who'd stopped accepting promises. Her daughter Zuri, 6 years old and bright as summer, was the reason she kept moving, kept working, kept fighting. Rent was due Friday. She needed $1,200. She had 4 days to find it. Her section tonight was the window area, overlooking the rain-soaked street where expensive cars deposited even more expensive people. Amara's natural hair was pulled back in neat protective braids, professional and practical. Her brown eyes, warm despite the exhaustion, scanned her tables with practiced efficiency. She was good at her job, excellent even, but excellence didn't pay bills when the tips went to cover Zuri's school fees and winter coats and the endless parade of expenses that came with raising a child alone. Have you ever worked in a restaurant in your city, seen the contrast between the world inside and the struggle outside? That was Amara's reality every single shift. Table 7 had been occupied for nearly 2 hours by a single customer, a Korean man who sat alone by the window in a wheelchair. Amara had noticed him when he'd first arrived, wheeling himself in with practiced efficiency while 2 men in dark suits took positions at adjacent tables. The birthday reservation had been for 2 people. The woman's wine glass sat untouched across from him, but the woman herself had disappeared an hour ago, her designer purse no longer hanging on her chair. He'd been abandoned. On his birthday, Amara had seen the small wrapped gift on the table, the reservation card that said birthday celebration in elegant script. She'd seen the way his jaw tightened every time he checked his phone, the controlled expression that couldn't quite hide the hurt beneath. The man was clearly wealthy. His charcoal suit was custom-tailored, fitting perfectly across broad shoulders and a lean frame. Even sitting in the wheelchair, his presence commanded attention. A Patek Philippe watch caught the light when he reached for his water glass. The wheelchair itself was expensive, sleek carbon fiber and chrome, the kind of high-end medical equipment that cost more than a car. But it was his face that held Amara's attention, sharp features that seemed carved from stone, dark eyes that missed nothing, a controlled intensity that radiated danger even in stillness. She'd refilled his water twice with professional courtesy. He'd thanked her politely each time, his English perfect with only the slightest Korean accent. His voice was deep, controlled, the kind of voice used to giving orders and being obeyed. The 2 men at adjacent tables, his bodyguards, she'd realized, maintained constant awareness of the room. The restaurant staff treated him with nervous deference that went beyond regular customer service. This was a man of power, of influence, of danger. But right now, he was also a man sitting alone on his birthday, checking his phone with decreasing frequency, his controlled expression slowly settling into something that looked like resignation. Amara's shift ended at 9. She collected Zuri from the staff break room, where the manager allowed her to do homework during Amara's shifts. It wasn't ideal, a 6-year-old spending hours in a cramped room with the hum of industrial dishwashers through the wall, but it was better than leaving her home alone or paying for childcare Amara couldn't afford. Zuri bounded out with her backpack, her natural hair styled in 2 puffs on either side of her head, her brown eyes bright with energy despite the late hour. She wore jeans that were getting too short and a purple sweater that had been washed so many times the color had faded to lavender. She is everything good in this world, Amara thought, everything pure and honest, and worth fighting for. They were walking toward the exit when Zuri stopped, her small hand pulling free from Amara's grip. Before Amara could react, Zuri walked directly toward table 7, toward the man in the wheelchair who was signing his check with careful precision. "Why are you sad?" Zuri asked, her voice carrying the absolute directness of childhood innocence. Amara's heart dropped into her stomach. She rushed over, mortified, already forming an apology. "I'm so sorry, sir. She doesn't understand," she began. But the man had gone completely still, his pen frozen mid-signature. He looked up at Zuri, and something cracked in his carefully controlled expression. Surprise first, then something softer, almost vulnerable. The change transformed his face from intimidating to something else entirely, something almost human beneath the dangerous exterior. "I'm not sad," he said to Zuri, his deep voice gentler than Amara had heard it all evening. "Yes, you are," Zuri insisted with 6-year-old certainty. "You're alone on your birthday. That's the saddest thing." The man's dark eyes widened slightly. "How did you know it's my birthday?" he asked. Zuri pointed at the small wrapped gift on the table, the reservation card. "She left, didn't she?" Zuri stated it as fact, not a question. Something flickered across the man's face, pain he couldn't quite hide. "Yes," he said simply. "She left." Amara's heart clenched. She understood now what she'd been watching all evening. The woman had taken one look at the wheelchair and decided she couldn't handle it, couldn't see past the disability to the man beneath. She'd probably made an excuse, maybe didn't even have the courage to say it directly. Just left him sitting there on his birthday with a gift he'd probably brought for her. "That's her loss," Amara said before she could stop herself. The words came out firm, certain, honest. His dark eyes snapped to her face, assessing, calculating, seeing her properly for the first time. "Is it?" he asked, and there was something dangerous in the question, a test. "Anyone who can't see past the chair doesn't deserve your time," Amara continued, meeting his gaze directly. "Mr. Lee," he supplied. "Lee Jaiwan." "Mr. Lee," she finished. "I'm Amara Clark. This is my daughter, Zuri." Lee Jaiwan studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at Zuri, who was watching him with open curiosity, no fear, no pity, just the honest interest of a child encountering someone new. "It's nice to meet you both," Jaiwan said, and his voice had warmed slightly, the dangerous edge softening. He looked back at Amara. "You work here, clearly. And you, Zuri, what do you do?" "I'm in 1st grade, Zuri announced proudly. "I can read chapter books now. And I'm learning to draw people. But hands are really hard." "Hands are hard," Jaiwan agreed seriously, as if discussing important business. "I've been drawing for years, and I still struggle with hands." "You draw?" Zuri asked, delighted. "When I have time," he confirmed. "Though lately I've had less time than I'd like." Amara watched this exchange, watched this powerful, dangerous man engage with her daughter with genuine attention, not the dismissive tolerance most adults showed children. There was something magnetic about him, something compelling despite, or maybe because of, the obvious danger he represented. The bodyguards at adjacent tables remained alert, but had relaxed slightly, which told Amara this interaction was acceptable, not a threat. "Mr. Lee, we should let you finish your evening," Amara said, though part of her didn't want to leave. There was something about this moment, this connection, that felt significant in a way she couldn't name. "Actually," Jaiwan said, his dark eyes holding hers, "I was supposed to celebrate with someone tonight. The reservation includes a full dinner service. It seems a waste to let it go unused. Would you and Zuri consider joining me?" Amara's breath caught. This was inappropriate, unprofessional. He was a customer, wealthy and clearly important, and she was just the server who'd brought him water. But Zuri's eyes had gone wide with excitement, and Amara knew there was no food at home except instant ramen and some wilting vegetables. Her pride wanted to refuse. Her exhaustion and Zuri's hopeful expression made her hesitate. "We couldn't possibly impose," she started. "It's not an imposition," Jaiwan said, and there was something in his voice, a loneliness that matched her own. "Consider it payment for honest company. I've had enough polite lies tonight. Your daughter's honesty is refreshing." "Please, Mama," Zuri whispered, tugging her hand. Amara looked at this man, really looked at him, saw past the expensive suit and the dangerous reputation to the human being who'd been abandoned on his birthday. Saw the way he'd responded to Zuri's kindness with unexpected gentleness. saw an opportunity to give her daughter a good meal and herself a moment of rest. "All right," she said softly. "Thank you, Mr. Lee. We accept." Jaiwan signaled to the server with a subtle gesture, the kind of minimal movement that still commanded immediate attention. Within moments, menus appeared, and the restaurant manager himself came over to confirm the order, treating Jaiwan with the kind of deference usually reserved for visiting dignitaries. Amara noticed how the manager's eyes flickered to the wheelchair, then quickly away, as if acknowledging it would be impolite. But Jaiwan seemed accustomed to this dance, his expression revealing nothing. Zuri settled into her chair with barely contained excitement, her small hands smoothing the white linen napkin across her lap with exaggerated care. She'd never been to a restaurant like this, Amara knew. Birthday celebrations meant pizza or chicken, not French cuisine in crystal chandeliers and hushed conversations. The guilt that lived permanently in Amara's chest tightened. She should be able to give her daughter these experiences, should be able to provide more than hand-me-down clothes and homework in break rooms. "What would you like, Zuri?" Jaiwan asked, his deep voice gentle as he turned his attention fully to the 6-year-old. "The menu can be complicated, so tell me what kinds of food you enjoy, and I'll help you choose." "I like chicken," Zuri said seriously, "and pasta, and anything with cheese." "A woman of refined taste," Jaiwan said with the hint of a smile. "The chicken here is excellent. They prepare it with herbs and serve it with vegetables that don't taste like vegetables." Zuri giggled at that, the sound bright and unself-conscious. "I don't like vegetables much," she confided. "Neither did I at your age," Jaiwan admitted. "But the chef here has a gift for making them tolerable." Amara watched this exchange, her chest tight with something she couldn't name. This dangerous man, this wealthy crime boss whose bodyguard sat alert at nearby tables, was discussing food preferences with her daughter like it was the most important conversation in the world. There was no condescension in his tone, no impatience, just genuine engagement. "And for you, Miss Clark?" Jaiwan asked, turning those dark, assessing eyes to her. "Amara," she corrected softly. "If we're having dinner together, Miss Clark feels too formal." "Amara," he repeated, and the way he said her name, careful and deliberate, made something warm unfurl in her stomach. "What would you like?" "Whatever you recommend," she said, because the menu prices made her dizzy and she had no idea what half the dishes even were. "I trust your judgment." Something flickered in his expression at that word, trust. The server took their order with practiced efficiency, and Jaiwan requested wine for himself and Amara, juice for Zuri. Within minutes, food began arriving, each course presented like art. Zuri's eyes went wide at the chicken, perfectly golden and arranged with colorful vegetables that looked nothing like the frozen mixed vegetables from the discount store. The conversation flowed easier than Amara expected. Zuri chattered about her school, about her best friend Maya who could do cartwheels, about her art teacher who said she had natural talent. Jaiwan listened with what seemed like genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions, remembering details. "When did you start drawing?" he asked. "What's your favorite thing to draw? Do you prefer colored pencils or markers?" Amara watched him carefully throughout the meal. The way he navigated eating while managing the wheelchair's position, the practiced efficiency of someone who'd long since adapted to his circumstances. His hands were strong, long-fingered and graceful despite the power in them. The bodyguards maintained their silent vigil, and staff moved around their table with nervous precision. "What do you do, Mr. Lee?" Amara asked when there was a lull in Zuri's enthusiastic storytelling. "For work, I mean." Jaiwan's expression became more guarded, the dangerous edge returning. "I manage security operations," he said, the careful phrasing deliberate, "for various businesses across Seoul." Security operations. The euphemism was transparent, at least to Amara. She'd worked in Seoul long enough to recognize the careful language of organized crime, the polite fiction that allowed powerful men to operate in expensive restaurants and legitimate businesses. She saw the way his bodyguard's hand moved slightly toward his jacket when Jaiwan spoke, saw the weight of authority in how staff responded to him. "That sounds important," she said neutrally, not challenging but not pretending ignorance either. His dark eyes studied her, calculating. "It can be," he said. "It requires managing many people, ensuring certain standards are maintained, protecting interests that need protecting." The subtext was clear. He was telling her what he was without saying it directly, giving her the chance to understand and decide how to respond. Amara met his gaze steadily. She should be afraid. This man was dangerous, clearly involved in criminal enterprise, the kind of person her mother would have warned her to stay far away from. But he'd been gentle with Zuri, kind despite his power, abandoned on his birthday because someone couldn't see past his wheelchair. It's good that people have protection, Amara said carefully. The world can be dangerous for those without it. Something shifted in his expression, approval mixed with surprise. Exactly, he said softly. Zuri, oblivious to the undercurrent of their conversation, piped up with her characteristic directness. Why don't your legs work? She asked, pointing at the wheelchair with innocent curiosity. Zuri, Amara said sharply, mortified. That's not polite to ask. But Jaiwan held up a hand, his expression thoughtful rather than offended. It's all right, he said. Honest questions deserve honest answers. He looked at Zuri, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. 3 years ago, someone tried to hurt me. They shot me, and the bullet hit my spine. My legs don't work anymore because the nerves that control them were damaged. Amara's blood ran cold. Shot. He said it so casually, like discussing a sports injury rather than an assassination attempt. Her hand tightened on her wine glass, suddenly very aware of the violence that surrounded this man's life, the danger that was part of his daily existence. Did you hurt them back? Zuri asked with 6-year-old simplicity. Jaiwan's smile was dark, something cold and deadly flickering in his eyes. They're no longer a concern, he said, and the casual menace in those words sent ice down Amara's spine. She should grab Zuri and leave. This man had just admitted to violence, to retaliation, to operating outside the law. Everything rational in her brain screamed danger. But he'd been nothing but gentle with her daughter, patient with endless questions, genuinely engaged. The disconnect between the dangerous man he described and the careful way he cut his chicken so Zuri could see how to use the knife properly created a cognitive dissonance Amara couldn't quite process. The meal continued, tension gradually easing as Zuri's chatter turned to safer topics. Dessert arrived, an elaborate chocolate creation that made Zuri gasp with delight. Jaiwan watched her with something almost like fondness, and Amara felt her heart do something complicated and inadvisable. They were finishing coffee, Zuri half asleep against Amara's side, when the restaurant's front entrance opened and Malcolm walked in. Amara's entire body went rigid. Malcolm, Zuri's father, the man who'd promised forever and disappeared the moment she'd told him she was pregnant. He looked drunk, his gait unsteady, his expression belligerent. He was scanning the restaurant, and when his eyes landed on Amara, something ugly crossed his face. No, not here. Not now. Malcolm weaved between tables, ignoring the maitre d's attempts to intercept him. You've been avoiding my calls, he said loudly enough that nearby diners turned to look. His English was slurred, aggressive. We need to talk, Amara. This isn't the time or place. Malcolm, Amara said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady, trying not to wake Zuri. Please leave. Don't tell me what to do, he snarled, reaching out to grab her wrist. His fingers closed hard enough to hurt, hard enough to leave marks. You owe me, you bitch. You kept my daughter from me, turned her against me. I didn't keep her from you, Amara said, trying to pull her wrist free. Her heart was pounding, fear and anger mixing into something acidic in her throat. You left. You wanted nothing to do with us. Zuri woke at the raised voices, her eyes going wide with fear. Mama, she whimpered. The wheelchair moved so fast Amara barely registered the motion. Jaiwan was suddenly there, his chair positioned between Amara and Malcolm, his voice dropping to a tone that radiated lethal calm. Remove your hand from her. Now. Malcolm sneered down at him, drunk confidence making him stupid. Who the hell are you? He demanded. Some cripple thinks he can tell me what to do. The bodyguards were moving, converging from their tables with predatory efficiency. But Jaiwan held up one hand, stopping them with a gesture. His dark eyes locked on Malcolm with such cold intensity that even drunk, Malcolm took an instinctive step back. I'm someone who doesn't tolerate men who put their hands on women, Jaiwan said, each word precise and controlled. I'm someone with resources you cannot imagine and patience that has just run out. You will leave this restaurant. You will not contact Amara again. You will not approach her daughter. If you do, there will be consequences that make you wish you'd never been born. Malcolm's face flushed red. You can't threaten me, he blustered, but his voice had lost conviction. Jaiwan pulled out his phone, made a call in rapid Korean. His tone was commanding, authoritative, the voice of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. Within 3 minutes, 2 police officers entered the restaurant. But instead of asking what the problem was, they walked directly to Jaiwan, bowing slightly in deference. Jaiwan spoke to them in Korean, gesturing to Malcolm. The officers nodded, then turned to Malcolm with expressions that promised this would not go well for him. "Sir," one of them said in English, "you need to come with us. There's been a complaint about public intoxication and harassment." "This is bullshit," Malcolm protested, but the officers were already escorting him out, their grips firm enough to prevent resistance but professional enough to avoid a scene. As they passed, Jaiwan said something in Korean that made both officers nod seriously. When they were gone, the restaurant manager appeared, apologizing profusely to Jaiwan in rapid Korean before switching to English. "So sorry for the disturbance, Mr. Lee. Please, tonight's meal is compliments of the house. We are mortified this happened." Jaiwan waved him off with casual authority, leaving cash that had to be double the bill as a tip. He turned to Amara, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" Amara was shaking, holding Zuri close. Her wrist throbbed where Malcolm had grabbed her. "That was Zuri's father," she said unnecessarily, her voice unsteady. "Yes, I gathered," Jaiwan said. "He won't bother you again." "How can you know that?" Amara asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Because I just made it very clear to those officers that Malcolm is to receive a warning. If he contacts you again, if he comes within 100 meters of you or Zuri, he'll find himself with charges that will see him deported. And if official channels fail," Jaiwan's voice dropped, "there are unofficial ones that are far more permanent." The casual way he spoke of violence, of using his power to bend law enforcement and threaten worse, should have terrified her. It did terrify her. But she was also holding her frightened daughter. Her wrist was throbbing, and this dangerous man in a wheelchair had just protected them both without hesitation. "Why?" Amara whispered. "Why would you do that for us? You don't even know us." Jaiwan was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. "Because I know what it's like to be vulnerable," he said finally. "To feel powerless. The wheelchair taught me that." And because his voice softened as he looked at Zuri, who was watching him with wide, trusting eyes. "You and your daughter treated me with kindness tonight when someone else decided I wasn't worth the trouble. That matters more than you know." They left the restaurant together, the bodyguards maintaining discreet distance. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets gleaming. Jaiwan's car, a sleek black Mercedes with specialized wheelchair accessibility, waited at the curb. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card, expensive cardstock with minimal text. Just his name and a phone number. "If you need anything," he said, pressing the card into Amara's hand. "And I mean anything. Call me. That man will come back. Men like him always do. When he does, I want you to have options." "I can't ask you for more help," Amara protested, though her fingers closed around the card. "You've already done so much." "You're not asking." "I'm offering," Jaiwan said. His dark eyes held hers, serious and intense. "I protect what I care about, Miss Clark. Even from a wheelchair. Especially from a wheelchair. Let me be clear, if your ex-boyfriend returns, if he threatens you or Zuri again, I want to know immediately." Amara looked at this man who'd just eliminated her immediate threat with a phone call, who'd shown her daughter more patience and kindness in 2 hours than Malcolm had in his entire existence. She looked at the card in her hand, at the promise of protection from someone who clearly had the power to deliver it. Every instinct screamed this was dangerous, that accepting help from a crime boss was trading one threat for another. But Zuri was pressed against her side, still trembling slightly, and Amara was so tired of being afraid, so exhausted from fighting alone. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything tonight." Jaiwan inclined his head, something almost like a smile touching his lips. "It was my pleasure, Amara. Truly. Happy birthday to me, indeed." He looked at Zuri. "Good night, little one. Keep drawing. Maybe someday you'll show me your artwork." Zuri managed a small smile. "Good night, Mr. Lee. Thank you for dinner." They watched as he transferred smoothly into the car, the bodyguards efficiently loading the wheelchair. As the Mercedes pulled away, Amara stood on the rain-slicked sidewalk holding her daughter and a business card that felt like it carried far more weight than simple cardstock should. She slipped it into her pocket, telling herself she'd throw it away later. But she knew, even then, that she wouldn't, because Malcolm would come back. And when he did, she'd need someone powerful enough to stop him. Even if that someone was dangerous enough to make her heart race with fear and something else she didn't want to name. 3 days passed in uneasy quiet. Amara went to work, picked up Zuri from school, made dinner from whatever she could stretch from her dwindling grocery budget, and tried not to think about the business card hidden in her wallet. Malcolm hadn't contacted her, which should have been a relief, but instead felt like waiting for a storm that hadn't quite arrived. Jaiwan's warning had worked, or so she told herself. She wouldn't need to call. She could handle this on her own like she'd handled everything else for the past 6 years. She was wrong. Thursday evening, Amara arrived home to find her apartment door ajar. Not broken, just unlocked, swinging slightly open like an invitation into nightmare. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pushed Zuri behind her, every instinct screaming danger. She should call the police. She should run. But this was her home, the tiny one-bedroom apartment she'd fought so hard to keep, and she needed to know. The inside looked like a tornado had torn through. Drawers pulled out, contents scattered across the floor. Her mattress flipped, cushions sliced open with stuffing spilling out like guts. The small TV was still there, her laptop untouched on the kitchen counter. This wasn't a robbery. This was a message. Amara's hands trembled as she held Zuri close, the little girl's face pressed against her stomach, protected from seeing the destruction. Someone had been here, in their space, touching their things, violating the small sanctuary she'd built. The fear was immediate and visceral, a cold weight settling in her chest that made breathing difficult. Then she saw the note on the kitchen counter, held down by a dirty coffee mug. The handwriting was Malcolm's, sloppy and aggressive. "You owe me $5,000 for emotional damages. Taking my daughter from me. Turning her against me. You have 1 week. I know where you work. I know where she goes to school. Pay up or things get worse." Amara's vision blurred. $5,000. She had 400 in savings. This was extortion, pure and simple, but reporting it meant police, courts, lawyers, time and money she didn't have. It meant Malcolm claiming parental rights he'd abandoned, meant custody battles and legal fees, and exposing Zuri to trauma she didn't deserve. The system wouldn't help her fast enough, wouldn't protect them adequately. She sank onto the edge of her violated couch, still holding Zuri, and felt the crushing weight of helplessness. This was what powerlessness tasted like, bitter and choking. She'd worked so hard, fought so long, tried so desperately to build something safe, and one vindictive man could destroy it all with a note and implied threats. Zuri was crying, soft hiccuping sobs against her shirt. "I'm scared, Mama. Can we leave?" "Yes, baby," Amara whispered, her own voice shaking. "We're leaving right now." She grabbed their important documents, some clothes thrown hastily into a backpack, Zuri's favorite stuffed elephant. They couldn't stay here. Not tonight. Not with the door broken and Malcolm's threat hanging over them. She could go to a shelter, maybe, or ask someone from work if they could stay on a couch for a few nights. The options spiraled through her mind, each one inadequate, each one temporary and insufficient. Then she remembered the business card. Amara sat in the building's small lobby with Zuri curled against her side, staring at the elegant cardstock. "Lee Jaiwan. A phone number. If you need anything." This man was dangerous, involved in criminal enterprise, someone she should stay far away from. But he'd also stopped Malcolm with a phone call, had shown genuine care for Zuri, had looked at her with something that felt like understanding. She pulled out her phone, fingers hovering over the numbers. This was a line she couldn't uncross. Calling him meant accepting help from a crime boss, meant entering his world in a way that dinner at a restaurant hadn't. It meant owing him, being indebted to someone who operated outside the law. Zuri whimpered in her sleep, and Amara's decision crystallized. She dialed. He answered on the second ring, his deep voice professional but warm. "Ms. Clark." Just the fact that he'd saved her number, that he'd known it was her calling, made something in Amara's chest tighten. "Mr. Lee," she said, her voice barely steady. "I need help." The warmth disappeared, replaced by sharp focus. "Tell me where you are." "I'm coming. My apartment building. 23 Hannum Street." Unit 412. But Mr. Lee, Malcolm broke in. He left a note. He wants money and I don't know what to do, and Zuri is terrified. And I'm sorry to bother you, but I didn't know who else. The words tumbled out in a rush, fear making her voice crack. Amara, Jaiwan's voice cut through her panic, calm and authoritative. Take a breath. You did exactly right by calling me. Stay in a public area of the building. Do not go back into your apartment. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in 18. Amara watched from the lobby window as the sleek black Mercedes pulled up, the back modified for wheelchair accessibility. Jaiwan emerged with practiced efficiency, transferring into the carbon fiber wheelchair with movements that spoke of years of adaptation. 2 bodyguards flanked him, one carrying what looked like a professional camera. They moved with military precision, alert and dangerous. Jaiwan wheeled himself through the building entrance with the bodyguards holding doors, his dark eyes scanning until they found Amara and Zuri huddled on the lobby couch. His expression shifted, something hard and cold settling over his features when he saw her face, saw the fear and exhaustion written there. Show me, he said simply. Amara led them upstairs, Zuri holding her hand in a grip tight enough to hurt. The apartment door still hung open, a violation that made Amara's skin crawl. Jaiwan wheeled inside, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. One bodyguard began photographing the scene with professional thoroughness. The other stood guard at the door. Jaiwan picked up Malcolm's note with careful fingers, read it, and his jaw tightened with barely controlled rage. $5,000 for emotional damages, he said, his voice deadly calm. He's escalating. This is classic abuser behavior. First the public confrontation to test boundaries, now private intimidation to establish fear. Amara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the apartment's warmth. I can't pay him. Even if I wanted to, I don't have that money. And if I did, he'd just come back for more. You're not paying him anything, Jaiwan said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He made a phone call in Korean, his voice clipped and commanding. The conversation was brief, one-sided, clearly orders being given and received. When he ended the call, he looked at Amara with an expression that mixed concern and determination. Malcolm has been located. He's currently at a bar in Itaewon. My people are making it very clear that he has 2 choices. Leave Seoul permanently within 24 hours, or face consequences that will make deportation seem pleasant. You can't just, Amara started, then stopped. Because of course he could. This was what he did, who he was. Power wielded with precision, threats delivered and followed through. I can and I am, Jaiwan said firmly. This man broke into your home, terrorized your daughter, extorted you for money you don't have. He's fortunate I'm only having him removed from the city rather than removed permanently. The casual way he spoke of violence should have horrified her. Instead, Amara felt a fierce rush of gratitude so strong it made her knees weak. Someone was protecting them. Someone with the power to actually make Malcolm disappear was using that power for her safety. You can't stay here tonight, Jaiwan continued, his tone gentler now. Pack essentials for yourself and Zuri. You're coming home with me. Mr. Lee, that's too much. I can find somewhere, Amara protested weakly. Where, he asked, direct and unflinching. A shelter where you'll sleep in a room with strangers and Zuri will be traumatized further? A friend's couch where you'll be a burden and still vulnerable? His dark eyes held hers. I have space. I have security. I have resources to ensure Malcolm never gets within a mile of you again. This isn't charity, Amara. This is practical necessity. For how long? She whispered. As long as you need, he said simply. Tomorrow we'll discuss more permanent arrangements. But tonight, your daughter needs to sleep somewhere she feels safe. I can provide that. Amara looked at Zuri, who was watching Jaiwan with trusting eyes, the same trust she'd shown when asking why he was sad in the restaurant. Her daughter needed safety more than Amara needed pride. She nodded, defeated and grateful in equal measure. Okay, thank you. The drive to Jaiwan's estate took 30 minutes through Seoul's nighttime streets. Amara sat in the back of the Mercedes with Zuri, watching the city pass in blurs of neon and shadow. Jaiwan sat in the modified front passenger area, his wheelchair secured, making occasional calls in Korean that had the efficiency of a general coordinating troops. The estate gates opened to reveal grounds that looked like something from a luxury magazine. Traditional Korean architecture blended seamlessly with modern accessibility modifications. Every pathway was smooth and wide enough for the wheelchair. Ramps integrated so naturally into the design, they were barely noticeable. The house itself was enormous, elegant, understated in a way that spoke of wealth so secure it didn't need to announce itself. A housekeeper met them at the entrance, bowing respectfully to Jaiwan before turning a warm smile to Amara and Zuri. "I am Mrs. Kim," she said in accented English. "Please, come. I prepare guest suite for you." The guest suite was on the ground floor, accessible without stairs, and larger than Amara's entire apartment. Silk bedding and soft neutrals covered a king-sized bed. The ensuite bathroom had a soaking tub and separate shower with rainfall fixtures. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a private garden where carefully placed lights illuminated stone paths and water features. Amara stood in the middle of luxury she'd only seen in movies, holding their pathetic backpack of hastily grabbed belongings, and felt the emotional weight of the day finally crash over her. Her hands shook. Her breath came too fast. She was in a crime boss's house with her daughter, dependent on a dangerous man's protection, and she had no idea what came next. "Mama," Zuri whispered, tugging her hand. "This place is like a palace." "It is, isn't it?" Amara managed, forcing steadiness into her voice. Mrs. Kim brought pajamas for Zuri, soft cotton printed with stars, and tea for Amara, something herbal and calming. "Mr. Lee wants you to know you are safe here," she said kindly. "His security team monitors entire property. No one enters without authorization. Sleep well." After Mrs. Kim left, Amara helped Zuri change into the pajamas and brush her teeth in the enormous bathroom. Zuri crawled into the massive bed, sinking into softness she'd never experienced, and her eyes were already drooping. "Are we safe now, Mama?" she asked sleepily. "Yes, baby," Amara said, smoothing her daughter's hair. "We're safe." Zuri was asleep within minutes, her breathing evening out into the deep rhythm of childhood exhaustion finally finding rest. It was the first peaceful sleep she'd had since Malcolm's restaurant appearance, the first time in days her small body had relaxed completely. Amara sat beside her, watching her daughter's face smooth of fear, and felt tears she'd been holding back finally slip down her cheeks. They were safe. For tonight, at least, they were protected and sheltered, and Zuri could sleep without nightmares. Unable to rest herself, Amara found herself wandering the quiet house. Security cameras tracked her movement, but no one stopped her. She found Jaiwan in a study, working at a large desk with multiple monitors, his wheelchair positioned for optimal reach. He looked up without surprise when she appeared in the doorway. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice quiet in the late-night stillness. "I needed to thank you properly," Amara said, stepping inside. "And to ask, why are you helping us? Really helping us, not just polite gestures. You've disrupted your life, brought strangers into your home, used your resources for people you barely know. Why?" Jaiwan was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face. Then he gestured to the chair beside his desk. "Sit, please." Amara sat, and he rolled his wheelchair to face her directly, no desk between them. "When I woke up in a hospital 3 years ago, unable to feel my legs," he began, his voice measured, "the doctors told me my life as I knew it was over. My father, who leads our organization, wanted to remove me from my position. He said a paralyzed man couldn't command respect, couldn't protect our interests, couldn't be feared or followed. I had to prove him wrong." He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his usually controlled expression. "It took 2 years of hell to rebuild my position, to prove I was still dangerous, still capable, still worthy of command despite this chair. I had to be twice as ruthless, twice as calculating, twice as uncompromising. I became the wheelchair-bound Mafia boss who was more terrifying than men who could walk. I won back my authority through force and fear. But in the process," he continued, softer now, "I lost something essential. Connection. Humanity. The ability to let anyone see me as anything other than my position or my disability. People either feared me or pitied me. No one just saw me as a person. Until your daughter asked why I was sad and your eyes filled with genuine compassion for a stranger being stood up." Amara's throat tightened. "You deserve better than being reduced to your wheelchair," she said quietly. "So do you," Jaiwan replied. You deserve better than fear and struggle and working yourself to exhaustion for barely enough to survive. You and Zuri showed me kindness when someone else showed me contempt. That matters more than you know. You deserve safety, security, the ability to breathe without constant panic. I can provide that. Let me. The weight of his words, the raw honesty in his voice, settled over the space between them. This dangerous man, this powerful crime boss, was lonely, was human beneath the armor of authority and violence, was offering not just protection but connection, recognition, the chance for both of them to be seen as whole people rather than their circumstances. What happens tomorrow? Amara asked. You mentioned more permanent arrangements. Tomorrow, Jaiwan said, we discuss the future. But tonight, sleep. You're safe here, Amara. I promise you that. And I keep my promises. Amara woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sound of her daughter's laughter echoing from somewhere in the house. The panic that came with disorientation lasted only seconds before memory flooded back. Jaiwan's estate. Safety. Protection. The guest's sweet silk sheets and the knowledge that Malcolm couldn't reach them here. She found Zuri in what appeared to be a personal library, floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books in Korean, English, and what looked like Japanese. Her daughter was perched on Jaiwan's lap in the wheelchair, his arms loosely around her to keep her stable as he held a picture book open for both of them to see. His deep voice read with surprising expressiveness, giving each character in Where the Wild Things Are a distinct tone. The image stopped Amara in the doorway, her heart doing something complicated and dangerous in her chest. Zuri had never had this. Malcolm had left before she was born, had never held her, never read to her, never shown the slightest interest in being a father. And here was this powerful, dangerous man, a crime boss who commanded fear and respect, reading a children's book with genuine engagement, his sharp features softened by concentration and something that looked almost like affection. Jaiwan noticed her standing there, his dark eyes lifting to meet hers. Something vulnerable flickered across his face, quickly masked, but not before Amara saw it. He was afraid she'd disapprove, she realized. Afraid she'd think this was inappropriate or that he was overstepping. Good morning, he said, his voice careful. She wanted a story. I hope that's all right. Of course, Amara managed, her throat tight. Thank you for indulging her. It's no indulgence, Jaiwan said, looking back down at Zuri with unexpected gentleness. I like stories. It's been a long time since I had someone to read to. Zuri twisted in his lap to beam at Amara. Mama, Mr. Lee has the whole collection of Wild Things books. Can we read them all? We'll see, Amara said, the automatic parent response even as her mind spun with implications. How many mornings would they be here? How long was temporary? What came after safety became routine. Breakfast was served in a sun-filled dining room by Mrs. Kim, who produced an elaborate spread that made Zuri's eyes go wide. Fresh fruit cut into perfect pieces, fluffy scrambled eggs, rice, traditional Korean side dishes, and pancakes shaped like animals. Zuri ate with enthusiasm while Jaiwan and Amara maintained careful conversation about nothing important, both aware that larger discussions waited just beyond this domestic moment. After breakfast, after Zuri had been set up in the library with coloring books and art supplies under Mrs. Kim's watchful supervision, Jaiwan asked Amara to join him in his office. The tone shift was immediate. This was business now, formal and serious. The office was impressive, masculine and efficient. A massive desk dominated the space, multiple monitors showing what appeared to be security feeds and financial data. But Jaiwan didn't position himself behind the desk in the traditional power arrangement. Instead, he wheeled his chair to the side, gesturing for Amara to sit in one of the comfortable leather chairs positioned for conversation rather than confrontation. I have a proposal for you, Amara, he said, his voice professional but not cold. I want you to hear all of it before you respond. Can you do that? Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the moment where protection became transaction, where gratitude met terms and conditions. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Jaiwan leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes serious and focused entirely on her. $120,000 per year, he began, and the number hit Amara like a physical blow. That was more money than she'd made in the past 5 years combined. A private suite in this house for you and Zuri. Full tuition payment for Zuri at Seoul International Academy, one of the best schools in the city. Complete healthcare coverage for both of you through my private medical network. A car and driver for your use. If you have family you want to bring from home, a separate apartment for them, fully furnished and maintained. Amara's mind reeled, trying to process the enormity of what he was offering. This was generational wealth, life-changing security, everything she dreamed of providing for Zuri, but never imagined actually having. Her hands trembled in her lap. In exchange for what? She asked, her voice barely steady. Your presence, Jaiwan said simply. Yours and Zuri's. Dinner with me most evenings when I'm home. Companionship during social events where I need to project family stability rather than isolated danger. Your genuine company, not pretense or performance. And, he paused, his expression becoming more vulnerable, eventual marriage. When you're ready, not on any timeline but yours. I want a family, Amara. I want what I saw this morning, reading to Zuri and having you there. I want to be the father she deserves, even though I can't walk. I want a partner who sees me as human, not just powerful or pitiable. The honesty in his voice, raw and unguarded, made Amara's chest ache. But the practical part of her brain, the part that had kept her and Zuri alive through 6 years of struggle, screamed questions and concerns. You're asking me to sell myself, she said, the words coming out harder than she intended. To trade my body and my daughter's childhood for money. Jaiwan's expression tightened, but he didn't look away. I'm asking you to accept security in exchange for something I lack and desperately want. Family. Connection. The reminder every day that I'm human and not just a position or a disability. You're right that there's a transaction element, but I'm not asking for your body, Amara. I'm asking for your presence, your honesty, your companionship. Intimacy, if it ever happens, will be entirely on your terms and timeline. You could hire anyone for that, Amara said, testing, pushing. You're wealthy enough to pay someone to play house. I don't want anyone, Jaiwan said, his voice firm. I want you. I want Zuri's unfiltered honesty, her joy, her questions that no one else dares ask. I want your strength, the way you protected your daughter even when you had nothing. I want your kindness, the way you looked at me in that restaurant and saw past the chair to the hurt beneath. I want to protect you both, provide for you both, be part of your lives in a way that matters. I want to be the father Zuri deserves, even if I'm paralyzed. Especially because I'm paralyzed, because I know what it's like to be written off as less than whole. Amara stood, needing movement, needing space to think. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden where stone paths wound between carefully maintained plants and water features. This was insane. This man was a criminal. He'd admitted to violence, to operating outside the law, to being someone dangerous. He was offering her daughter a life she could never provide on her own, education and stability and safety that came with the price of living in a world where threats were eliminated with phone calls and consequences were permanent. What do you expect physically? She asked, her face heating but needing absolute clarity. You mentioned eventual marriage. What does that mean in practical terms? Jaiwan was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a vulnerability that made her turn to look at him. I'm paralyzed from the waist down, Amara. I can't. He paused, and for the first time she saw him struggle with words, perform in traditional ways. Intimacy, if you ever want it, will look different than you might expect. I can't make promises about conventional physical relationships. What I can promise is respect, patience, and that nothing happens unless you freely and enthusiastically want it to. I won't coerce or pressure you. This arrangement doesn't include sexual demands. The honesty, the admission of limitation without shame but with clear acknowledgement, settled something in Amara's chest. If I accept, she said slowly, what happens if I want to leave? If this doesn't work, if I change my mind, if I meet someone else? Jaiwan's expression hardened slightly, the dangerous edge returning. You can leave whenever you choose. I won't hold you prisoner or force you to stay. But, and his voice dropped to something colder, you can never speak of my business, my associates, what you learn about my organization. Betrayal has permanent consequences. Not to you directly. I would never hurt you or Zuri. But your freedom, your ability to build a life outside these walls, would become very difficult. I would ensure that. So I'd be trapped, Amara said, turning the word over in her mind. You'd be protected, Jaiwan corrected. There's a difference. Trapped implies I'm keeping you against your will. What I'm saying is that once you're inside my world, you can't expose it without consequences. That's not personal to you, Amara. That's survival in my business. But within those boundaries, you'd have more freedom than you have now. Financial security, time with your daughter, the ability to pursue interests and dreams without the crushing weight of poverty. Amara pressed her palms against the cool glass of the window, her reflection ghostly against the garden beyond. She thought of her violated apartment, the fear in Zuri's eyes, the exhaustion of working double shifts for barely enough to survive. She thought of Malcolm's threats, the constant worry about rent and food and school fees. She thought of this morning, watching Jaiwan read to her daughter with patience and care no one else had ever shown. This was a gilded cage he was offering, luxury and safety in exchange for her presence and eventual commitment to a man she barely knew, a dangerous man who wielded violence as casually as most people made phone calls. But it was also the only real protection she'd been offered, the only path to giving Zuri the childhood she deserved. I need time to think, Amara said finally. This is, she gestured helplessly, enormous. Life-altering. I can't make this decision in a moment. Take 24 hours, Jaiwan said, and there was relief in his voice that she was considering rather than rejecting outright. Stay here while you decide. Observe how we live, how the household operates, how I interact with Zuri. See if you can imagine this being your life. And know that whatever you choose, you're safe here during that time. No pressure, no demands. Just consideration. The next 24 hours unfolded like a window into a possible future. Amara watched Jaiwan with Zuri, patient with endless questions about his wheelchair, about why he lived in such a big house, about whether he had any pets. He answered everything honestly, age-appropriately, never condescending. When Zuri asked if his legs hurt, he explained phantom pain in terms a 6-year-old could understand. When she asked if he was lonely, his eyes had found Amara's across the room before he said, sometimes, but less now. She observed the household staff, who treated Jaiwan with respect rather than fear. Mrs. Kim spoke to him frankly, updating him on household matters with the ease of long familiarity. The security team was ever-present but professional, not thuggish. She overheard business calls conducted in Korean, Jaiwan's tone commanding and decisive, but not cruel. She watched him maneuver the wheelchair with practiced expertise through spaces designed for his mobility, never apologizing for his disability, never diminished by it. He worked from his office for several hours, managing what appeared to be legitimate security consulting businesses alongside whatever darker operations funded his wealth. He was competent, intelligent, controlled, and she felt the pull of possibility, the weight lifting from her shoulders at the idea of not worrying about money. The vision of Zuri in a good school, making friends, taking art classes, living without fear. The strange, dangerous attraction to this man who'd shown her more genuine care in a few days than anyone had in years. Evening came. Another family dinner where Zuri chattered about the art she'd made and Jaiwan listened with full attention. After Zuri was asleep, Amara found herself back in Jaiwan's study, the space that had become their place for honest conversation. I have conditions, she said without preamble. Jaiwan looked up from his laptop, his dark eyes focusing entirely on her. Name them. First, Amara said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Zuri can never be involved in your business, never exposed to violence. Whatever you do in your work, it stays separate from her. Second, I need honest communication. Don't hide dangers from me if they affect us. I can't protect my daughter if I don't know what threats exist. Third, you respect my timeline for everything, including marriage. I won't be rushed or pressured. Fourth, if you ever lie to me about something important, something that affects our safety or this arrangement, the deal is void and we leave. Jaiwan was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then he extended his hand across the desk. Agreed, he said simply. On all counts. And I'll add my own condition. You communicate honestly with me as well. If something bothers you, if you're uncomfortable, if you need something, you tell me directly. I can't read minds, Amara. I need your honesty as much as you need mine. She took his hand, his grip firm and warm, and felt the weight of the decision settle over her like a cloak. This was real now. Binding. A path chosen that she couldn't fully see the end of, but that offered more than she'd ever had. And it's Jaiwan, He added softly, when we're alone. Not Mr. Lee. I want you to see me as a person, not a position. Jaiwan, she repeated, testing the intimacy of his given name. All right, we have a deal. His expression transformed, relief and something deeper, something that looked like hope, softening his usually controlled features. Thank you, he said quietly, for trusting me, for giving me this chance. I won't waste it, Amara. I promise you that. The first month settled into a rhythm that felt both surreal and increasingly natural. Amara woke each morning in silk sheets that still felt too luxurious to be real, found breakfast already prepared, and watched Zuri transform from a cautious, anxious child into someone who laughed freely and asked for second helpings without fear there wouldn't be enough food. Seoul International Academy accepted Zuri with a phone call from Jaiwan that Amara suspected involved more than just tuition payment. Her daughter started school in a crisp new uniform, carrying a backpack that wasn't held together with safety pins, excited about art class and music lessons, and a teacher who spoke both English and Korean. The transformation was staggering. Within 2 weeks, Zuri had made friends, started bringing home paintings she'd created, and stopped having nightmares about Malcolm breaking in. Amara's own days took shape around the household. She wasn't expected to clean or cook. Mrs. Kim handled that with cheerful efficiency, but she found herself naturally taking on coordination duties. Organizing Jaiwan's social calendar, managing household appointments, learning the names and roles of his security team. It felt less like employment and more like partnership, two people building something functional together. Dinners became the anchor of each day. Jaiwan made it a point to be home by 7 when possible, wheeling into the dining room, where Zuri would launch into enthusiastic recounting of her day. He listened with genuine attention, remembered details from previous conversations, asked thoughtful questions. When did your art teacher say the gallery show would be? Did Maya's dog have her puppies yet? Have you finished that chapter book about the girl detective? Amara watched these exchanges with growing wonder and something more dangerous. This man who commanded a criminal empire with ruthless efficiency was patient with a 6-year-old's rambling stories, celebrated her small victories, consoled her minor disappointments. He'd arranged for art supplies to fill an entire corner of the library. He'd bought Zuri the puppy she'd been dreaming of, a small golden retriever she'd named Biscuit, who followed her everywhere. The small touches accumulated like evidence of something Amara was afraid to name. Her favorite coffee appearing on the kitchen counter each morning before she came down, prepared exactly how she liked it. The jazz playlist that started playing softly when she entered the library to read. The cashmere throw that appeared on her preferred reading chair after she'd mentioned being cold one evening. Books she'd expressed interest in showing up on her nightstand. Jaiwan never made a production of these gestures, never pointed them out or sought acknowledgement. They simply appeared, thoughtful and observant, the actions of someone paying close attention to her preferences and comfort. Amara found herself doing the same, learning his patterns and needs. She noticed he took his tea strong and preferred silence in the early morning. She observed that phantom pain was worse on rainy days and started ensuring the heating was adjusted in his office. She learned he liked classical music while working and instrumental jazz in the evenings. She began leaving books she thought he'd enjoy on his desk with small notes about why she'd chosen them. They were courting each other, Amara realized one evening. Not with grand romantic gestures, but with careful attention and small kindnesses, building intimacy through daily consideration. It terrified her how much she looked forward to seeing him each day, how her heart lifted when she heard his wheelchair in the hallway, how she'd started noticing the strength in his arms and the intelligence in his dark eyes and the unexpected gentleness in his hands. 6 weeks after moving in, Amara found Jaiwan on the terrace late at night, staring out at the city lights of Seoul spread below like scattered stars. The air was cold, autumn turning sharp with the promise of winter. She brought 2 blankets, draping one over his shoulders before settling into the chair beside his wheelchair with the other wrapped around herself. Can't sleep? She asked softly. Phantom pain, Jaiwan said, his voice tight. My legs remember what they used to be. The nerves send signals that don't match reality anymore. It's worse some nights than others. Is there anything that helps? Amara asked. Time. Distraction. Sometimes medication, but I try to avoid that when I can, he said. He was quiet for a moment, then added, talking helps. Having someone here helps. Tell me about before, Amara said gently. Who were you before the shooting? What was your life like? Jaiwan's expression shifted, memories playing across his features. Reckless, he said finally. Arrogant. I was my father's heir, being groomed to take over the organization, and I thought power made me invincible. I took unnecessary risks, didn't listen to security warnings, believed I was untouchable. The shooting was supposed to be a warning from a rival faction. They aimed for my leg, meant to wound and intimidate. But I moved at the wrong moment, and the bullet hit my spine instead. He paused, staring out at the city. I woke up in a hospital unable to feel anything below my waist. The doctors said I'd never walk again. My father, he looked at me with such disappointment, such certainty that I was finished. He started making arrangements to pass leadership to my cousin instead. Said a paralyzed man couldn't command respect, couldn't protect our interests, couldn't lead. Amara's chest tightened at the pain in his voice, the old wound that clearly still ached. But you proved him wrong, she said. I had to, Jaiwan said, his voice hardening with remembered determination. It took 2 years of absolute hell. I had to be twice as ruthless, twice as calculating, twice as effective as anyone else. I rebuilt my network from the wheelchair, proved I could still eliminate threats, still manage operations, still inspire enough fear to maintain control. Every meeting was a test. Every negotiation was someone looking for weakness. I couldn't show vulnerability, couldn't admit pain, couldn't let anyone see me as diminished. His hands tightened on the wheelchair's armrests. I won my position back through force of will and strategic violence. I became the paralyzed crime boss who was more dangerous than men who could walk. But in the process, I lost something essential. I lost connection, humanity, the ability to let anyone close. People either feared me or pitied me. No one just saw me as a person anymore. Until Zuri asked why I was sad, Amara said softly. Jaiwan turned to look at her, his dark eyes reflecting the distant city lights. Until your daughter saw a lonely person and tried to help, he said. Until you looked at me and saw someone being hurt rather than someone to avoid or manipulate. You have no idea how rare that is, Amara. How precious. You did it, though, Amara said, her voice firm. You rebuilt everything. You proved them all wrong. That takes incredible strength. It also took becoming someone I'm not sure I like very much, Jaiwan admitted quietly. Cold. Calculating. Quick to use violence as a solution. I justify it as necessary for survival in my world, but sometimes I wonder if I've lost too much humanity in exchange for power. Amara reached out, her hand covering his where it rested on the armrest. You read bedtime stories to my daughter, she said. You remembered she likes purple and bought her art supplies in every shade of lavender and violet. You make terrible jokes at dinner to make her laugh. You've never once made me feel less than, never used your power to intimidate or control me. That's not someone who's lost their humanity, Jaiwan. That's someone who's been protecting it carefully and is finally safe enough to let it show. His hand turned beneath hers, fingers intertwining with hers, warm and strong. You make me want to be better, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You and Zuri both. You make me feel like maybe I'm more than just the wheelchair and the violence and the position. Like maybe I'm still worth something beyond fear and respect. You are, Amara said, and she meant it with a ferocity that surprised her. You're worth so much more than you think. They sat in comfortable silence after that, hands linked, watching the city breathe below them. Amara felt the shift happening inside her chest, the recognition that this wasn't just arrangement or transaction anymore. She was falling for him, for his strength and vulnerability, his danger and gentleness, the way he built himself back up from devastation and was now carefully, cautiously, allowing himself to be human again. The realization terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Morning came with an unexpected visitor. Kong Minsik, Jaiwan's head of security, requested a private meeting with Amara in the small sitting room off the main library. He was a man in his 40s, compact and efficient, with eyes that missed nothing and the bearing of former military. Ms. Clark, he began in careful English. I need you to understand something about your position here. May I speak frankly? Please, Amara said, though anxiety prickled along her spine at his serious expression. Mr. Lee's enemies see his paralysis as weakness, Minsik said without preamble. They've made 3 attempts on his life in the past 18 months. All failed because our security is exceptional and because Mr. Lee is far more dangerous than they anticipate. But now that you and Zuri are here, the situation has changed. Amara's blood ran cold. Changed how? You represent a new vulnerability, Minsik explained, his voice neither cruel nor kind, simply factual. Not because Mr. Lee is weak, but because hurting you proves he cannot protect what he cares about. That's valuable to his enemies. It damages his reputation, his authority, his position, which makes you, and especially Zuri, very attractive targets. Amara's hands clenched in her lap. Why are you telling me this? Does Jaiwan know you're having this conversation? Mr. Lee asked me to brief you on security protocols, Minsik said. What I'm adding is context he might be too protective to share fully. You need to understand that living in this house, being part of his life, makes you visible to people who would use you to hurt him. Tomorrow we're implementing enhanced security measures. Armored vehicle for Zuri's school transport. Personal bodyguard for you when you leave the estate. Additional cameras and perimeter security. These aren't suggestions, Miss Clark. They're requirements for your safety. Amara nodded slowly, processing the reality she'd been avoiding. She'd known Jaiwan was dangerous. She'd accepted that his world included violence and threats. But having it laid out so clinically made it immediate and terrifying in a new way. What happens if someone does target us? She asked quietly. Minsik's expression hardened. We prevent it. That's our job, and we're very good at it. But you need to be vigilant. Report anything unusual. Don't deviate from approved routes or schedules. Trust the security team. And understand that Mr. Lee will do absolutely anything to protect you and your daughter. Anything at all. The warning was clear. Jaiwan's protection came with violence attached, with consequences for anyone who threatened what he'd claimed as his. Amara should be horrified. Instead, she felt a fierce gratitude that someone with such resources and ruthlessness was on her side. 2 days later, the threat materialized in a way that made Minsik's warnings terrifyingly concrete. Amara was in the library with Zuri when she heard raised voices from Jaiwan's office. Security moved through the house with sudden urgency. Mrs. Kim appeared to collect Zuri with a gentle but firm insistence that she needed help in the kitchen right now, distracting the little girl before she could sense the tension. Amara found Jaiwan in his office surrounded by his security team, his face carved from granite, eyes promising death. On his desk sat an open package, and Minsik was photographing its contents with grim efficiency. What happened? Amara asked from the doorway. Jaiwan's eyes snapped to her, and she saw rage there, barely controlled fury that made her take an involuntary step back. Then his expression shifted, controlled violence giving way to something more careful. Come in, he said. Close the door. You need to see this. The package had contained photographs. Professional quality surveillance shots. Zuri arriving at school, backpack on her small shoulders, Biscuit the puppy on a leash beside her. Amara at the market, selecting vegetables, unaware of the camera. Both of them together in the estate's garden, visible through the walls. Each photo was time-stamped from the past week. And beneath the photos, a note in Korean. Minsik translated, his voice flat. It says, "We can reach them anytime we want. Your protection means nothing." Amara's vision blurred at the edges, fear so visceral it made her knees weak. Someone had been watching her daughter, following them, photographing Zuri at school, where she was supposed to be safe. The violation felt absolute, the threat crystal clear. Jaiwan made 6 phone calls in rapid Korean, his voice lethal and precise, giving orders that sounded like declarations of war. His wheelchair moved between the desk and the windows with agitated energy, controlled fury evident in every gesture. When he finished, he turned to Amara with an expression that mixed rage and determination. "We're implementing immediate changes to security protocols," he said. "Zuri's school transport will now include a full security detail. You will have 2 bodyguards minimum whenever you leave the estate. We're installing additional countermeasures. And I'm activating every resource I have to identify who sent this package." His voice dropped, becoming something colder and more dangerous. "They made a mistake, Amara. They thought threatening you and Zuri would demonstrate my weakness. Instead, they've given me justification to eliminate them entirely. This ends now." The attempted kidnapping happened 3 days later, during afternoon pickup at Seoul International Academy. Amara received the call from Minsik while she was reviewing household accounts in the library. His voice was controlled but urgent. There's been an incident at Zuri's school. She's safe. The bodyguards prevented it. We're bringing her home now. The drive from the estate to the meeting point felt like moving through water, time distorting with anxiety. When the armored SUV finally pulled through the gates, Amara was already outside, barely letting them stop before she wrenched open the door. Zuri was crying, deep shaking sobs that came from somewhere primal and terrified. She launched herself at Amara with desperate force, small arms wrapping tight enough to hurt. Mama, Mama. They tried to take me. The men tried to grab me, but Mr. Choi stopped them, and there was yelling, and I was so scared. Amara held her daughter, rocking her, murmuring reassurances while her own heart hammered against her ribs with rage and terror so intense it tasted metallic. Over Zuri's head, she met Minsik's eyes. He was standing with two other security personnel, all of them carrying visible tension and what looked like fresh bruising on one man's knuckles. 3 men attempted to grab her during the transition from building to vehicle, Minsik reported with clinical precision. Our team intercepted immediately. The attackers fled, but we have clear surveillance footage and partial plates on their vehicle. One of our men sustained minor injuries. Zuri was never actually touched, but she saw the confrontation. Amara's vision blurred with tears and fury. Her baby had been targeted, had witnessed violence, had been seconds away from being stolen. Every protective instinct she possessed screamed for blood, for revenge, for the complete destruction of whoever had dared threaten her child. "Where is Jaiwan?" she asked, her voice shaking. Already mobilizing, Minsik said quietly. "This ends tonight, Miss Clark. I promise you that." Amara carried Zuri inside, settling into the library with blankets and soft reassurances. Mrs. Kim brought warm milk and cookies, her usually cheerful face tight with concern and anger. Biscuit the puppy sensed distress and pressed close to Zuri, offering wordless comfort. It took an hour for Zuri's sobs to quiet into hiccuping breaths. Another hour before she fell into exhausted sleep against Amara's chest, small fingers clutching her mother's shirt like a lifeline. Amara held her, fury and fear warring in her chest, and waited. Jaiwan found her there as dusk settled into full darkness. His wheelchair moved silently across the library floor, his expression carved from stone, eyes burning with cold rage barely contained. He looked at Zuri sleeping against Amara, at the tear tracks on the little girl's face, and something dangerous flickered across his features. "Is she hurt?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. "Physically, no," Amara said quietly. "Emotionally, she's terrified. She saw men trying to grab her, saw your security team fight them off. She's 6 years old, Jaiwan. She shouldn't have to know this kind of fear." "No," he agreed, his voice dropping to something lethal. "She shouldn't, and she never will again. I give you my word on that." "What are you going to do?" Amara asked, though she already knew. "What I should have done the moment they sent those photographs," Jaiwan said. His wheelchair moved closer, and she saw the absolute certainty in his dark eyes, the ruthless determination of someone who'd made a decision and would see it through regardless of cost. "I'm eliminating the threat permanently. The faction that sent those pictures, that ordered this attempted kidnapping, will cease to exist by morning." The casual way he spoke of destroying an entire criminal organization should have horrified her. Instead, Amara felt fierce gratitude, savage satisfaction that someone with his resources and capacity for violence was using it to protect her daughter. "Do what you need to do," she said quietly. "Keep us safe." Something shifted in his expression, surprise mixed with relief and something deeper. "You're not afraid of what that means?" he asked. "What I'll have to do tonight?" "I'm terrified," Amara admitted honestly. "But not of you. Never of you. I'm afraid for Zuri, for what could have happened if your security hadn't been there. I'm angry that we're in danger because of your world. But I also know that in your world, there's only one language that matters: power and consequences. So yes, do what you need to do. Protect what's yours." "You are mine," Jaiwan said, his voice rough with emotion. "You and Zuri both. And I protect what's mine absolutely. No half measures, no warnings, no mercy. They threaten my family. That has only one answer." "Then give them that answer," Amara said, meeting his gaze steadily. Jaiwan reached out. his hand cupping her face with unexpected gentleness despite the violence promised in his eyes. "I'll be back before dawn," he said. "Stay here. The security team is on highest alert. No one gets through these walls. Trust that." "I do," Amara whispered. "I trust you." He left within minutes, his security team mobilizing with military efficiency. Amara heard vehicles departing, watched through windows as the estate transformed into a fortress, additional personnel taking positions around the perimeter. She carried sleeping Zuri to bed, tucked her in with Biscuit curled at her feet, and settled into the chair beside her daughter's bed to wait. The night stretched long and terrible. Amara dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every sound, checking that Zuri was still breathing, still safe, still there. Her mind spun with images she didn't want to imagine, violence happening somewhere in Seoul's darkness, Jaiwon coordinating destruction with the same controlled efficiency he brought to everything else. Dawn was filtering through the windows, pale and cold, when she heard the vehicles returning. Amara left Zuri sleeping and went downstairs, finding Jaiwon in his office. He looked exhausted, still in the same dark suit but rumpled now, damp in places, a faint metallic scent clinging to him that made her stomach clench. "Is it done?" she asked from the doorway. Jaiwon turned his wheelchair to face her, and she saw the weight of what he'd ordered in his eyes, the toll of violence even when justified. "It's done," he said quietly. "The rival faction that sent those photographs, that ordered the kidnapping attempt, no longer exists. Their leadership has been eliminated. Their operations have been absorbed or destroyed. Their threat is permanently neutralized." Amara crossed the room, knelt beside his wheelchair so their eyes were level. She should feel horror at what he'd just admitted, at the deaths implied in those clinical words. Instead, she felt only relief and gratitude so intense it made her chest ache. "Thank you," she said simply, "for protecting us, for doing what needed to be done." Jaiwon's carefully controlled expression cracked, vulnerability bleeding through. "You should be horrified," he said, his voice rough. "I just ordered people killed. I coordinated violence that left bodies in its wake. I'm not a good man, Amara. I'm dangerous, ruthless, willing to destroy anyone who threatens what's mine." "You read bedtime stories to my daughter," Amara said fiercely, her hands covering his where they rested on the wheelchair's armrests. "You remembered I like jazz. You've made Zuri feel safe for the first time in her life. You're patient with her endless questions. You've given us stability and protection when no one else could or would. You're paralyzed, and you still made me feel more protected than anyone who could walk. You're a better man than anyone who abandoned you because of that wheelchair." His eyes searched her face, desperate and vulnerable. "I need you," he admitted, the words seeming torn from somewhere deep. "Not the arrangement, not the household management, not even just the protection of family stability. I need you specifically. You make me feel human again, like I'm more than the chair, more than the violence, more than the position I've fought so hard to maintain. When I come home and you're here, when Zuri asks me to read to her, when you bring me tea without being asked, I feel like maybe I'm worth something beyond fear and respect." "You are," Amara said, her voice breaking with emotion. "You're worth so much more than you know. You're brilliant and strong and protective and gentle when you think no one's watching. You've built an empire from a wheelchair, proved everyone wrong who doubted you, and you still have enough humanity left to care about a 6-year-old's art projects and whether I'm cold while reading." She stood, leaned down, her hands framing his face. "You're mine too," she said softly. "Broken pieces, wheelchair, violence, and all. I'm choosing you, Jaiwon. Not because of the money or security, but because of who you are. The man who was abandoned on his birthday and still had the grace to be kind to a stranger's child. The man who fights phantom pain every night but never complains. The man who just destroyed his enemies to keep my daughter safe." His hand came up to cup the back of her neck, pulling her closer. "You're mine," he breathed against her lips, the words more plea than claim. "Tell me you're mine." "I'm yours," Amara whispered back. "And you're mine. Forever." The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, testing, then deeper, years of loneliness and need pouring into connection. Jaiwon's hands tangled in her braids, holding her close, and Amara felt the shift complete inside her chest. This wasn't arrangement or transaction anymore. This was love, real and complicated and dangerous and absolutely certain. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jaiwan rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said simply. "Not someday, not eventually. Soon. Let me make this official, permanent, protected by law as well as loyalty. Let me be Zuri's father in every way that matters. Let me spend the rest of my life ensuring you both never know fear or want again." "Yes," Amara said, and the word felt like freedom and commitment intertwined. Yes to all of it. 2 weeks later, Jaiwan proposed formally with Zuri as his willing accomplice. They were having dinner in the garden, the autumn evening cool, but pleasant with outdoor heaters creating warmth. Zuri had been giggling all through the meal, barely able to contain her excitement about the secret she'd been entrusted with. When dessert finished, she practically vibrated out of her chair. "Now, Appa," she asked, using the Korean word for father that she'd started calling him the week before, making Jaiwan's eyes suspiciously bright the first time. "Now," he confirmed with a smile. Zuri pulled a small velvet box from her pocket with the exaggerated care of someone handling precious treasure, presenting it to Jaiwan with ceremony. He opened it to reveal a ring that made Amara's breath catch. A sapphire the color of midnight, surrounded by small diamonds, elegant and understated and absolutely stunning. "Amara Clark," Jaiwan said, his deep voice steady despite emotion evident in his eyes. "You came into my life when I'd forgotten what it meant to be wanted for who I am rather than what I can do or provide. You and Zuri gave me family, gave me purpose beyond power and position, gave me reasons to be better than the man I'd become. You saw past the wheelchair to the person beneath. You've given me your trust, your presence, your affection. You've let me be part of Zuri's life. Let me be the father she deserves." He took her hand, the ring held between them. "I'm asking you to make it permanent. Marry me. Be my wife. Let me be Zuri's legal father. Let me spend the rest of my life protecting you both, providing for you both, loving you both with everything I have. I can't promise perfection. I can't promise my world won't be dangerous. But I can promise absolute devotion, complete loyalty, and that I will never stop fighting to keep you safe." "Yes," Amara said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Jaiwan. Yes to all of it. Forever yes." Zuri cheered, launching herself at both of them in a hug that nearly knocked Jaiwan's wheelchair backward. They held each other, the three of them tangled together, and Amara felt the weight of her old life finally lift completely. This was her family now. Chosen, protected, permanent. 6 months later, everything had transformed in ways Amara still sometimes couldn't believe were real. The wedding had been small, private, perfect, held in the estate's garden with only close associates and staff as witnesses. Zuri had been flower girl in a purple dress that made her beam with joy, scattering petals with exuberant enthusiasm. Jaiwan wore traditional Korean formal, where that emphasized his broad shoulders and handsome features. Amara wore elegant white, simple and beautiful, her braids woven with small flowers. The vows they'd written themselves spoke of scars and healing, protection and trust, chosen family and permanent commitment. Jaiwan promised to be the father Zuri deserved, to protect them both with everything he had, to see Amara as his equal partner despite the power differential their worlds had started with. Amara promised to stand beside him, to remind him of his humanity, to build a life where both danger and love could coexist. When they'd kissed as husband and wife, Zuri had cheered loudly enough to make everyone laugh, breaking the solemnity with pure childhood joy. Now, Amara stood on the terrace of what was fully her home, watching Zuri play in the garden with Biscuit, who'd grown from puppy to enthusiastic young dog. The afternoon sun was warm, spring making everything green and alive. In her hand was a tablet showing the financial reports from her cafe, the small coffee shop Jaiwan had helped her open in a trendy Seoul neighborhood. It was thriving, becoming known for excellent coffee and the owner's warm smile, and the interesting story of how a single mother from abroad had built something beautiful with her husband's support. Jaiwan's business had legitimized further over the past months, his security consulting operations expanding while the darker aspects of his empire receded to background management. He was still powerful, still respected, still dangerous when necessary. But the violence was more distant now, handled by others, his direct involvement limited to strategic decisions rather than active operations. Arms wrapped around her waist from behind, Jaiwan's wheelchair positioned close so he could pull her back against him. "Happy?" he asked, his voice warm against her ear. "Absurdly," Amara said, leaning into his embrace. "I keep thinking I'll wake up and this will all be a dream. The cafe, this life, you, all of it." "Not a dream," Jaiwan murmured. "This is real. You're real. We're real." He turned her gently so she could see his face, the contentment there that had replaced the old careful control. "You saved me, Amara. Not from danger or enemies, but from becoming someone completely cold and inhuman. You and Zuri reminded me there's more to life than power and respect and fear." "You saved us too," Amara said softly, her hand cupping his face. "From poverty and fear and Malcolm's threats. You gave us safety and stability and family." "Appa," Zuri's voice called from the garden. "Come play with us." Biscuit learned a new trick. Jaiwan smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious features into something younger and lighter. "Duty calls," he said with mock solemnity. They went down together, Amara walking beside his wheelchair as he navigated the smooth garden paths with practiced ease. Zuri demonstrated Biscuit's new trick, spinning in a circle on command, with breathless pride. Then she climbed into Jaiwan's lap in the wheelchair like it was the most natural seat in the world, and Biscuit jumped up to balance precariously across both their laps. "Group hug," Zuri demanded, and Amara folded herself into the embrace, all three of them plus the dog creating a tangle of limbs and laughter in the wheelchair. This was her life now. The paralyzed Mafia boss who'd been abandoned on his birthday, broken and powerful and lonely. The struggling single mother who'd been terrified and exhausted and desperate. The 6-year-old girl who'd seen a sad person and asked why with the directness of innocent kindness. They'd found each other in an expensive restaurant during a rainstorm, and they'd built something permanent from that chance meeting. The wheelchair that had once symbolized Jaiwan's vulnerability, his greatest weakness in a world that prized strength, now held all three of them. Strong enough to carry everyone that mattered. Stable enough to be their foundation. The physical representation of how they'd taken something broken and made it beautiful. Amara pressed a kiss to Jaiwan's temple, held Zuri close, and let herself believe completely in this future they'd built. Safe, loved, protected, home, forever.